My name is Maria Snider, and I'm a leader with Kids Count on Us. I'm an organizing project of Isaiah, which represents more than 500 community-based child care centers across Minnesota. I'm the director of Rainbow Child Development Center in St. Paul. There has never been a time that highlights the importance of childcare more than during this pandemic. We are grateful for the steps that you and your administration have taken to help mitigate the impacts of this crisis on childcare so far. Your actions prevented many childcare providers, me, from having to go out of business. Unfortunately, the situation for Minnesotans in regards to childcare remains dire. Although schools across the state have shut down and children have been cut off from in-person learning, childcare has remained open to serve. Despite being underfunded for decades, childcare providers across the state have stepped up and put themselves on the front lines at the very height of risk and uncertainty. And they do so all while making on average less than $12 an hour. I want us to take that in for a moment. The people who teach, comfort, and care for Minnesota's children during the most important years of their development are making less than $12 an hour. Childcare providers in Minnesota are majority women and nearly half women of color. So when we think about the race and gender inequities that exist in our state, this is another piece that disproportionately harms women and women of color who are doing the hard work of raising Minnesota's children. We are stuck in an impossible situation. Providing high quality childcare is expensive. Teachers can't get a raise because parents are already struggling to afford childcare as it is. The system is broken, and it has been for a long time. One day, a parent came to me with an exciting new job opportunity after 3 years of working full-time and going to school full-time to provide a better life for her family. We were so excited, and I congratulated her for this well-deserved promotion. Then came the hard part. We compared the job offer with the child care assistance eligibility requirements, and it became very clear that her family's economic situation would be much worse should she accept this position. With tears in her eyes, she made the difficult decision to decline that job. And in truth, the hardest part of preparing to speak today was trying to choose just one of these stories. Dozens of parents have cried in my office, facing the same heartbreaking choices. And this is not just a problem for families who are considered low income. Every day, thousands of Minnesota parents are faced with the impending financial crisis of trying to afford childcare. Minnesotans are forced to choose between their house payment, healthcare, promotions, or even remaining in the workforce at all and paying for childcare. The pandemic and resulting economic crisis has exposed two things. One, the essential role that early educators play in our society. And two, the profound gap between the essential role we play and the resources available to us to care for our children and for our communities. As Minnesotans, we have a moral and practical responsibility to care for those who care for us. We can choose to fund early childhood education so that every child, every parent, and every teacher has the opportunity to thrive. In this moment, we have an opportunity to build a new contract in our society. Governor Walz, how will you lead toward building a Minnesota where the wealthiest pay their fair share to invest in caring for our children and caring for every Minnesotan?
Well, first of all, Maria, I'll start by listening to people just like you. I think all of you listening, I think every one of us can associate with your remarks. And I think as we understood very early on, the COVID pandemic was going to hit our littlest ones, and it was going to hit our childcare providers. And I'm grateful that you would say the state of Minnesota, I think, and outside groups have said probably responded as well as any state, but it has still been a crisis. It was barely enough. We went into it as a crisis. We're coming out of it as a crisis. This was if you will, a life preserver for a short amount of time. But what we've come to know, and I think what we built during this time is, we have made it clear that childcare providers and early childhood education is at our top priority, whether it be how we view on funding it or how we view immunizations around childcare and keeping them open, how we looked at using pandemic money to focus directly on childcare. And you know what? You stayed open in the hardest of times, which allowed people to work. The good news is that the business community is actually with us on this one. Now, the question will be, are they going to put their money where their mouth is? Because we're going to be very clear, and I can talk in greater detail on this, and I think we need to get a time as we're going to unveil a budget this week. And it's going to be very clear. We need to recover from the pandemic, and we need to make sure that those who are hit hardest by it are where our focus is. We know that the Great Recession of 2009, that Black and brown communities were slower coming back from that. Job creation was slower, and those that were hit the hardest. This is even worse. So our budget's going to focus on some pretty clear-cut things, on our youngest ones, students, and those that take care of them. It's going to focus on the working families who are hit hardest by this. And when we talk about focusing on business, we're talking about small businesses and family-owned businesses that are especially in communities of color. And just to be very clear, while this pandemic didn't hit everybody equally, it hit communities of color incredibly hard. It also served some communities incredibly well, and they made an awful lot of money. And it is my intention to ask those folks to pay their fair share that had done that, to make sure that we're able to budget and use those revenues. This is not the time for austerity. You're going to hear legislators tell us that we need to cut to the bone and we need to pull back. When they cut the Department of Human Services, that cuts people who were hurt by the pandemic. And you know why people were hurt by the pandemic? Because they were doing things necessary to protect their neighbors, especially those on the front lines, which all too often, you're exactly right, Maria, happen to be women and women of color more often. So when we have a budget that's going to reflect both a fiscal reality, it also better focus on a moral reality. And so I hope what you're going to see, Maria, is the hundreds of millions that we've invested in childcare. And I think, just to be clear and let all of you know, every day I get a COVID briefing. I get a COVID briefing that ends with childcare, because I want everybody to leave that meeting knowing what's on our mind. It starts on what's happening with COVID, moves through all the other things, and it ends with it. And I want you to know at the center of this has been the Children's Cabinet. While we don't have a specific state agency right now, I can tell you this, that I always wondered, and this was a Republican governor, and Arnie Carlson had a Department of Children, Families, and Learning. So I've asked the Department of Education, Department of Human Services, all of these to work around the idea of children and equity-centered decision-making, and that will continue on. So I need you to lift that voice, Maria. You're exactly right. I hope you saw it last week. We negotiated with SEIU on the personal care attendants at home and got them to $15.25 an hour. And I want to be very clear, that's a wage floor. None of us are taking a victory lap when we get people to $15 an hour. That is just a basic human need. And so anything we can do to partner together, we talk about this inside-outside game. I recognize this. Isaiah brings an incredibly powerful moral voice. It brings an incredibly powerful economic voice. And here's the thing, this is not anything we should be ashamed of. We need to exercise our political power. I'm not asking any of you to be wherever you find your partisanship, but we better exercise this power, because again, if we don't, you know what we're going to see. You're going to see my budget that focuses on just what I said, that raises significant revenue and pumps it right back into the families that were hurt by this. And you're going to see another vision that said we should cut taxes to the wealthiest and we should cut government spending. I will disagree with both.
Thank you, Governor Walz. I really appreciate your time today. We all do. And we look forward to continuing to work with you and your administration to build a caring economy and a democracy that honors every person's dignity.